Hi, welcome to the video. We are writing Rust code. Today we're going to look at an application that has, at the moment, terrible error handling and try and make it have good error handling. It's a command line program, and that will very much affect our approach as opposed to it being a library, which we would handle differently. We're going to use the anyhow crate to do this. I'm 95% sure. But before we get into the error handling, let's just talk about what we're doing. So effectively what we're doing is building a clone of the very useful tool called towncrier. What towncrier does is it collects up little bits of news that you've put in separate files and turns that into a changelog file in a kind of nice standard format. The way I've been developing this app, and if you watch the previous video, you'll have seen the beginning of this. I've developed it quite a bit since then, is I've been running the real towncrier, seeing what it does in different situations, and then comparing what my program does with that to try and make sure that we're compatible with the features that we support, which is going to be a tiny subset of the real thing. We're going to be compatible with what towncrier does. So the way I've been doing it is I have this directory called test cases, and each of these directories is a different test case. And then inside this, for example, this one that's called minimal, which has a little description here of what it is, smallest possible test I could think of. We have a little file for what arguments get passed into towncrier or into our program, one argument per line. And then we have a directory called start. And inside start is the situation before you run towncrier. So basically there's a config file here, which is, in this case, it's empty, but it has to exist. And then there's a directory called news fragments, which in this case contains one fragment of news, with this name 123.bugfix, and then some contents. So that basically what we're saying for this test is if you start with start, with just this news fragment and empty config file, you should end up with end. So afterwards you've got a news fragments, but it's now empty. Some git commands got run, which we haven't done yet. Some stuff got printed on standard out and standard error. The config file is still there. But the news fragment got deleted from news fragments, and critically a changelog file got created, which looks like this. It has the one piece of news in it, and it takes our version number and date from this args.txt that we provided here. So that's a minimal example. And then the example I've been working on most recently is custom fragment types. So something that towncrier supports is if you put in your config file entries like this, you can list, instead of the types being things like bug, fix, feature, things like that, you can define your own list. So in this case, custom 1 and custom 2. And this directory is it's actually this file extension. And if you don't give the file extension, it just lower cases your name. You have to have a name. Anyway, so I've just written code offline that parses this TOML file, and then uses these types instead of the types that you get by default with towncrier and with our program, which we're calling changelog builder. And then I've also provided 3 news fragments, one of which has a wrong name, a name that would be right, bug fix, but is now wrong because we're using custom types instead, and then 2 that match these custom types. And when we get to the end, then the 2 good names should have been removed from news fragments, but it should just leave behind the one that's not relevant to it, which would have been relevant without our config file. And then in the news file, you can see, look, the custom type names are being used. These custom pieces of news are appearing. So it's all working. All right. So what this video is about error handling. So we're going to, I think, make a new test case and see how towncrier behaves if something goes wrong. And the first thing I think that could go wrong is if the config file doesn't exist at all, which is we're passing our config in our main method. So we're going to have to deal with that for a start. We're going to have to move this out if we're going to be able to test it and stuff like that. So we're going to have to think about all that. But first, let's see if we can get towncrier to fail. So let's copy our minimal example. Test cases minimal, and call this test cases missing config. Maybe it should be error missing config, just to make it easy to find all the error cases. Might be useful, mightn't it? Otherwise, all the errors probably going to be a bit boring. So let's gather them together. We won't put them in. I was just thinking, should we put them in a separate directory? But I'd have to fiddle with my scripts to do that. So let's just make a namespace. All right. So now we've made a new test case directory called error missing config. Let's describe it by. Oh no, I don't want to save as. I want to move it to error missing config. So all my description files, I decided not to give them all identical names to each other because it's easier to navigate the world if you do that, but it's quite annoying. I have to do that every single time, but anyway. Okay, so this fails because the config file is missing. And now, it's controversial whether we want our program to actually print exactly the same thing that towncrier prints when there's an error. Let's find out. Maybe that's a terrible idea. Right, the arguments we give to the program, these look fine. And then we're going to delete this file. And we've still got a news fragment, and that's fine. Now, the end is completely irrelevant, but that's okay because we've got this amazing script called create test case. We just give it the name of our test case, and what that does is runs the real towncrier inside that directory that we created, or a copy of that directory that we created, and then it so it creates for us an end directory. However, it broke because towncrier failed to run. So we need to fix our script. So run test case runs here it runs towncrier. And this script is set up to fail if something goes wrong. I've got a set -e here. So I'm just going to have to allow it to fail when we actually run the command. And then we'll just turn on stopping. But before we do that, why don't we just print out like the status code, which is $? And put that in a directory called status.txt. I reckon. Something like that. Now this is in our run test case place. So this is the wrong place actually, but let's do it in create test case, which is the thing we're actually running, which has a similar set of code. So it should be similar. All right, so what we're doing is, we need a set +e here. So what we're doing is saying you are actually allowed to fail for the next command, running that command, getting the status and writing that into status.txt, and then saying you're not allowed to fail anymore. All right, let's try again. Okay, it said it created an end, so let's find that end directory. Status should be non-zero. Yeah, it's a 1, so that's pretty encouraging. By the way, we'll have to recreate all our test cases to have this status file in end, where we can do that. So there's something in std error, there's nothing in std out, and the news fragments are unchanged. All right, so we need to have our std error look something like this. No configuration file found, looked back from blah. Okay, it would be really nice if we could say what file names we look for. So I'd kind of like my implementation to be better than this. So which is going to get a bit awkward because this test is now going to check something that isn't quite right. So I guess what we could do, I do want to give myself that freedom. So what I think I'm going to do is write some kind of fairly standard-ish mechanism for saying, please replace this with this. And Yeah, right, let's do that. So we're going to make a new file. We're going to make up a new convention for this, which is just replacements. Well, let's just say after .bash, right? So basically, I messed that up. Stuff to do after you've run the test before checking the output. So what we're going to say is, let's imagine this is being used. We're going to do some kind of sed command like this. What was it? It said no configuration file found. I would like it to say no configuration file found. Instead of that, I'd like it to say std error.txt. I would like it to say no configuration. Or maybe it's actually the other line that we don't like. It should say look back from /work for a file named this or this or this, I guess would be. All right, let's do that. So that needs, all right, let's not use slashes in our sed. So sed is a command for searching and replacing if you haven't seen it before. In for a file named, oh no, that's wrong. This is what we're looking for. We want to replace with this, and I would actually like that in quotes. I guess we'll use double quotes for a file named. Now at the moment we're only looking for one file named. Later we might use other file names, but for now. So what we're saying is instead error.txt, replace this with this, and I want to find a replace within that file and modify that file. And does sed do that automatically? I think maybe it does. No, we need a -I. Yeah. Edit it in place, please. Okay, so this is a detour. Like always in my videos, we immediately take a detour. But I want to be able to do if we want to change our behavior so it's different from what towncrier does. That should be Tom all. I'd really like it if this didn't wrap onto multiple lines, but I don't know whether this is going to work. Let's try it, shall we? Let's put a single quote on here. No, let's... I mean, we could do a here dot, couldn't we? Is this the thing to do? No, because we don't actually want new lines in it. I don't know if it's going to work, but anyway. Let us just try. Something like that. So the backslash in these bash scripts means ignore the new line and carry on, I hope. Let's try and see if that works. Right. So now we've written a bash command to change the output that really happened into the output we would like to happen. And I guess this after should be after. In this case, we only want this to run if we ran toml, not if we ran our program, because our program's actually going to do this. So in this case, we probably should name this after after -real, right? Like after the real run of towncrier, do this. Right. Oh, did that not work? No, because I did the thing that I tend to do, which is no. Okay, we're getting there. Say mov and then just type the name I want without typing the name it currently has. Right, so there we go. All right, so now we've got the script we want to run, and when we're running create test case, after we've run towncrier, we will say if I think the file exists is that what was it called? After real.bash. If that file exists, then source it, which means run its contents. Semicolon, I think. Should it? We'll find out. Okay. Let's try it. Create a test case. Now, end should have, if that all worked, that would be amazing if that all worked first time, wouldn't it? It didn't work. But it did seem to, it didn't seem to fail. It's interesting, isn't it? Source dir / after real.bash. That looks right. Let's just print. Oh, I guess that -f is wrong. There's a -d for this is a directory. That'll help me search, hopefully. Yep. So we want true if file exists. No, we want -f. True if file exists. Okay, I'm back and I figured out what was going wrong. Basically, I was in the wrong directory. Is that right? Yeah. So don't worry too much about it. But basically, when I use the right directory to look for this file, I find it and I run it. I've just done that. When I ran it, I got an error because my sed is all broken, probably because I tried to be clever and have it on multiple lines. So let's just not. Oh, did I delete the hash? That would definitely break it. That could be it. Right, let's try. Yeah. I lost a hash. I put the hash in the wrong place. All right, let's put it all on one line, see if it works. So it said it ran it. So that's good. Now if we look at std error, it didn't actually run successfully. Right. Because I guess we're not in the right directory. When we're running this, we're in the directory. Like, did we cd? We cd'd into dir/work. All right, so this std error file is inside dir/work. There should be a file called std error in the current directory, so that's not it. So let's get it to do something more useful, like some kind of run an ls or something, so you can see what's going on. Fine. All right, so we ran an ls. It said we're in this work directory. It said there's a file called stderror.txt. I guess it's not finding what we're looking for. It's not printing an error, is it? All right, so let's do something simpler. Did I spell stderror.txt right? Stderror.txt, yeah, okay. Let's do something simpler, like just find and replace for looked with foo. Like so. Now, did that work? Yes. Okay, so there's something up with just, I guess, the thing we're searching for. Look back from. Let's just try look back from. Let's copy that. And just replace look back from with like something like foo. Run it. It should do. Yeah, foo colon. Right. So what's wrong? Is it the colon? This is the way I debug my regular expressions, by the way. It's probably the slash then. I just make them. Okay, that is unhappy. It didn't find. Look back from colon tumpter. Really? Why on earth not? Yeah, this is how I debug my regular expressions. I can't think and talk. Yeah, I make it smaller and smaller until it works, and then I make it bigger again until it stops working. So why is this not working? Is it the T? Okay, I've figured this one out, and it's an odd, subtle bug. So if we look back at my create test case script, what it does is, what I've got it doing is running my after script, and then running this other clever thing, which replaces our actual temporary directory with this special string tumpter, which I should probably make a bit easier to understand by like putting like that or something around it, because I might have then figured that out. So I think what I should do is I should run that first. And why not also do this thing that fixes the output that goes into stdout.txt first. And also remove the gitdir, and then do our thing where we can run scripts after all of that stuff. So now the file stderr actually will contain, that's confusing, but it helped me figure out what's going on. Actually will contain the right stuff. Like this tumpter thing. So our script will run as we expect it to, hopefully. Alright, so if that didn't make any sense, don't worry about it. But yeah, so that's it, could be a colon. Now this says brackets tumpter. Let's go back to all the things we were doing before, which were all fine, using hashes. And tumpter /work. Let's try replacing it with foo just for a second. And that worked. So now we can go back to here. Again, I'm going to need to recreate all my... No. So the other thing, if I'm going to change how tempdir looks, I need to change it in my run test case script, which has a copy of all this code, which is absolutely awful. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to use like bash scripts that call bash scripts, but I probably should have. By now it's getting a bit unwieldy, this. Anyway, this is the script that runs the test case and compares it against what happened when you ran create test case, so it has to do the same thing. Alright. All that is to say, now I run my test case, and I create my test case, and it creates this output, this stderr.txt file in end, but then I've changed what I want it to contain to something that I think is more helpful. So it's still going to say no configuration file found, but it's also going to say what directory it looked in, like before, and what file name it was looking for, which in our case is just, for the moment, is just towncrier.toml. So this is good. I've managed to say we behave exactly the same as towncrier, except in this specific case where I want to just run a little script first. And I'm just going to leave it all on one line because we haven't got all day, have we? Just for Andy to gild his lily. Okay, so now let's run that test case. Let's do a cargo build just out of principle beforehand. And its test cases / error missing config. And we failed. Our test case failed for a number of reasons. Number one, the status should have been 1 and instead it was 101. And std error should have said no configuration file found, but instead it said thread main panicked. It did say failed to find to real config file. That's a typo. And then an underlying error. So it's printing some kind of error. It's panicking, saying there isn't a config file, which is the same thing that towncrier does. It just does it more neatly. And also stood out. Looked different because we said loading template, which is also wrong. So let's fix that because that's easy to fix. We don't actually load a template at all, but we certainly shouldn't lie about how we're loading a template before we've read in a config file. In fact, this printing should happen inside build, so it's in totally the wrong place. But we're still lying. We're not actually loading in templates, but maybe in the next video or something. Okay, so when we run it now, it won't complain about stood out. So it's only complaining about our status code is wrong and the error we print is wrong. So let's fix it. And well, the first thing to do is move this code out of main so that we can have some kind of standard behavior in main to say if you receive any errors, print them in a kind of standard way, which we'll think about in a second. I think. Are we going to need to control the status? Let's not worry about it. Okay, too many things at once. Right, so all right, so this thing I think we'll leave as like this. And at some point we might want to unify the way we describe what you did wrong with how towncrier tells you, like, you gave us the wrong command line arguments. But that's going to be a hassle and probably more hassle than it's worth, so maybe we won't bother. And also, I'm not certain the error messages from towncrier will be good, whereas I know from, it's possible at least to make the error messages from the thing we're using, which I've forgotten the name of, clap. It's possible to make error messages from clap good, even if we haven't done it yet. So anyway. All right, so we're going to extract out parsing this config into a function, which will move into our main library instead of main, allowing us potentially to test it if we want to. And we're just going to make it throw some kind of useful error. All right, so first extract it into a function, which we'll call read config. And it takes in this file system, which means, by the way, that we can test it if we want to. If we make it take in a reference to a DIN file system, it's going to return. For now, it will just return a config. I don't know why that didn't already work. Oh, because it doesn't know what a CB config is. All right, so let's move this immediately into our library. So this is read config. Then we'll be able to import CB config. Okay. Yeah, first of all, we need to make this module actually exist. Then we need to bring in CB config and bring in file system. Now we should be using CB config like this, I think. Which means that this needs to make it available. Yep. like so. Now this should be pub. And this needs to be exported. So this needs to be... And these don't really need to be pub, do they? The only things that need to be pub are things that are getting used from main. So read config does, real file system does. And I guess none of the others do, maybe. We can just use those, and we can do the same for this, which is... No, this needs to be pub. Pub read, pub use, read config, read config. Oh, we need build as well, obviously. And is file system used in main? Right, so now we should be able to import read config. Yeah, file system is used in main, so this should also be pub. Something like that. Okay, and again, I don't think our fake file system needs to be public. Well, now main's not actually using file system, so maybe file system doesn't need to be public either. Alright, looking good. Our tests still pass. What about all tests? Real tests. So there's a few things. Yeah, we need to recreate these tests because I've messed up how they look by doing how they should look by doing this thing. So let's just do them. I don't ever create all test cases scripts, so I'll have to do them one by one. Content above. We've done error missing. I shouldn't need to do that again. Minimal. What else was there? Prepend. So these are just... we've done varied fragments, I think. So these all just test like the behavior. We'll get into that if we do a video about the actual config file, the actual changelog file shape. Then this will. Have we done custom? Okay, so error missing, config failed, all the others passed. So yeah, content above fragmentized. Yeah, if we get into the changelog shape again, which we should do in the next video, if we do a video about this, it depends whether I think this is getting too boring for you to watch. But yeah. All right, so we're back to error missing config. We're still returning 101 instead of 1. We're still printing the wrong thing. So we've achieved absolutely nothing. We've achieved a refactoring, which is much better than nothing. All right, so what we want to do is return an error from read config instead of panicking. Currently we're panicking. It gives us no control over how the errors look. And I did some research on what error library to use. Now this is, I haven't come up with a very novel answer at all. I've come up with the most vanilla answer possible. So there are basically two approaches to error handling. If you're communicating with machines, then you should provide a specific enum for almost every function to say this function could fail in this way. And a good way to do that is to use the create this error. And if you're mainly talking to humans, then one approach, you could still do that with very specific enums. But it's a lot of work for not a lot of benefit because the human reading it won't get to see like that enum type. They'll just see the text that you provide. So why not just provide text? So one approach then is to use the anyhow. Is that what it's called? I think it's called anyhow crate. Or there's something called color IRE if you need nicer formatting. So I'm going to try anyhow. Pretty sure it's called anyhow. And then I'm going to return a result of blah, comma, anyhow error, like this. And then I guess we're going to return an OK. Well, no, we'll in a sec. Yeah. All right. For now, we'll return an OK of this thing. In a second, we'll make that better. So anyhow error, basically, most errors can be turned into anyhow errors. And you can add context, which is the thing that is particularly important. So all these error messages that we're providing here, we can, instead of panicking and providing that information, we can call context. And then question mark it. And maybe with context? What is with context? No, that's something totally different. Yeah, that was a method on the error type. So I thought you could just call context on an error and anyhow kind of gave you what you needed to make that work. But I might be wrong, so let's have a quick look at what anyhow's documentation says. So let's do a cargo doc. What did I say? I said include. Is it document? Oh, what is it? Hang on. There's a thing that makes it document private stuff. Document private items. Yeah. I just want to be consistent because I did this last time. It's not going to matter to us. Okay, so we've now got the documentation for anyhow generated, so we can read it, and it always loses my preference. All right, so you can use result anyhow error. By the way, I never like renaming results, like using different things are all called result. I'd much prefer to use just the main result, so I always do that. And my point is, basically, if you say anyhow result, like it returns an anyhow error, you can then do a question mark on anything which implements error, and it will get converted into an anyhow error. But the context thing is the bit I'm interested in. So certainly an anyhow error itself does have a context method. But I also thought, yeah, okay, here's the thing. So you can attach context. So this is not an anyhow error. The read is returning some IO error, but we're still able to call with context on it. And I wonder why. Oh, could it be because we used anyhow context? It could be. Yeah, let's try that. So use anyhow context. Okay, now it's happy. So we're getting somewhere, I think. So, so if we fail to parse our toml config file, we will return an anyhow error from this function because of the question mark. But before we returned it, we just added a bit of context to say what went wrong. Now we could, you might be thinking we could get rid of the OK and the question mark, and this would, it might work. Because it might convert it, the calling context might convert it into an anyhow error. Yeah, it does work. All right, great. Is that better? I don't know. That's arguable. I kind of prefer the other way. But I'm going to, no, it's short, it's less code to do the same thing. It's got to be clearer, right? Okay. Anyway, so yeah, calling .context, it turns out converts, obviously, because where would it store the context? It converts whatever error you got back, which in this case was something that the TOML library returned like a some kind of SERDI error, I guess. It converts it into an anyhow error, and adds this context onto it. And we can, if we do the same thing here, and question mark it, because this was panicking. That expect there was panicking. And I should say read. So instead of panicking, we create an error, an anyhow error with some context in it, and then we question mark, which means immediately return. Now, if I run our test, now I should build first. Test cases, error something, run it. And all right, we've got a problem. All right, the first problem is read config returns a result now. So we'll just unwrap it for a second and just see what happens when you unwrap an anyhow error. Because unwrap means panic with that error message. And now it still says the panic thing, so that's no good. And it just says, cool, yeah, okay, so that's not a nice error message, so we're not getting very far. So I guess what we want to do is deal with this error. And I think anything that could go wrong, we want in some way to be able to question mark this. And then have some standard error handling code for anything that could go wrong. So I think I want to extract, I don't know, everything that could go wrong. Let's just say everything. What did I do there? All right, I'm just going to have a function, which my thing doesn't know how to make, called run, which does everything, and then main's job is just going to be handling errors. So it's going to return a result of either nothing or an anyhow error. And what does build return? Nothing. So I think we're just missing a, no, what's it complaining about? Yeah, okay, we need to, yeah, all I was complaining about is if we get to the end here, which we never will, we'll return an okay. No, we will. We definitely might. So we could just return an okay. No, this is fine. All right, so we need to call run. But the point is, I guess it's if this is an error, we do something. Like this. Now, did this print on... No, it's printed on standard error, didn't it? Is there an E print on? I think there is. Just print the error. Something like that. So, I guess we should also exit with a certain status, shouldn't we? How do you exit? Is it like that? This is the process exit. Let's just write it out explicitly to be, and it feels like that's better. Don't know why. All right, so struggling, but we got there. So everything that we did in main is now in a function which returns a result, which just allows us to say run it, and then if it was an error, print that error, and then exit with a status of 1. Otherwise, just go to the end, and that means exit with a status of 0. Now, I actually don't like code like this because it's hard to see that I'm actually doing something. So I prefer to say run the thing, and then deal with the error handling separately. Now I can see I'm running. The main thing I'm doing in main is just calling run. Before I felt like it was buried in here. Now, all that talking aside, let's run it again. We can see that now the status code that we were expecting is now happening. So it's not complaining about that anymore. It's only complaining about standard error being different from what expected. It now says failed to read config file, and what we would like it to say is more like this. So let's copy that and make read config return approximately the right kind of stuff, which is a little odd. There's kind of a line break in here. How we're going to format this. I think we're going to format it like this. And put this stuff in here. Missing the full stop. And we'll use a raw string. Oh no, we can't use a raw string because we're doing this clever stuff here. So that means we need to escape these quotes. And now we're running off the end of the line, which looks awful. So we can do something like that, which maybe looks better. I don't like it, but I do insist on 80 characters wide stuff. So look, our test case passed. So we immediately managed to make it work. Amazing. We've modified a whole load of stuff because we changed all the test cases to behave slightly differently. I wonder why git commands changed. That seems surprising. Oh, everything changed because of that temp dir. Oh, I'm so sorry. For anyone reading back through this later, this changelog, I'm just gonna do a nasty old diff that has both things in it. The temp dir change, the status code change, and my actual functional changes, and I'm so sorry. And yeah, generally, like changing the way test cases work at the same time as actually doing something. Anyway, so what we did was we handle missing config file with expected error message. Close. All right, so that was a kind of basic outline. If you're here to figure out how to handle errors, like return an anyhow error and then like print it out is, I guess, the answer. And use context to make your anyhow error look the way you want it to look. Where is read config? Yeah, because it was our context message that got printed out there. Now we like in future we're going to change this so it's doesn't just say towncrier.toml, I guess, and not just look for towncrier.toml, but we'll leave that for now. So that was that's one possible error. But what I want to do is I want to handle errors better inside build. That's really what we're doing here. So I would like build to return a result in a similar way. We can just put an OK at the end. Like so. And then we're going to make all these things that currently panic like this. Return like do a question mark to return an error. But let's find a plausible looking failure. Like for example, if you try and list the news fragments directory, but it doesn't exist, I presume towncrier won't like that. So let's try out towncrier with a missing news directory. Make sure that does actually cause an error, and then try and recreate it. So test cases. Let's do minimal again. Yep. So this is going to be error missing news fragments. So we made ourselves a new test case, and start is not going to have a news fragments in it. Like this. Gone. And then hopefully, let's rename this to error missing news fragments. And this checks error behavior when the news fragments directory typing is gone is missing. Does towncrier complain? Let's try it. So in our end, we've got what happened. Status code was 0. Nothing on standard error. No news fragments to remove. Alright, it was okay with there not being a news fragments directory. I guess that's actually pretty sensible, isn't it? And it still created a news file with nothing in it. Alright, so this is not an error. It's a perfectly legitimate test case. Do we pass it? Almost. Oh, we've got a few errors because we haven't actually handled the result that's coming back from build yet. So we could make this pass. Currently, we just don't. It looks like we just don't print anything. Yeah, and we panic. All right. Do we care about this error case? I guess the point is, it's all about error handling, and in this case, this isn't an error. So this is still on topic for this video. We should fix this to say, what did it say? Failed to find fragments. Yeah. We should fix this to say, like, this find with types can't fail in this way. So let's have a look at find with types. It doesn't ls, and it's ls that could fail. So I guess what we want to say is, if... Well, hold on. Why would this fail? It fails because in a real file system, if you ls something, it doesn't exist. We're doing a reader, and reader will fail if the path doesn't exist or we don't have the right permissions. So I guess we want to handle a particular type of error, which is that the thing doesn't exist. Other things probably are errors. So we're going to have to find out what's inside ls. So let's match on what happens when you ls. And depending on what happened, we'll put something different into file names. So if it was all okay, we got back an answer, then we're just going to return file names. We're going to return that answer rather, which we'll call file names. If there was an error, then we want to match on the error kind, I think, because IO errors have an error kind. So we want to match on that and do different things based on the different possible errors. There's 41 match arms. Let's add them all and then only keep the one we want. So not found, we know we want to treat fine. So we will just say it's an empty list. What is file names? It's a vec, yeah. So we can just return an empty vec. And then any other IO error, I think what we want to do is question mark it. It should actually be this, I think. I think that will work. No, we want to just return. What's E? What's E? E's the error. So yeah, we want to call context on the error and then return this. We can't use question mark because maybe we can, but this is better. This is better. And we need to use, yeah, for some reason it's not auto-completing for us to use anyhow context. I mean, we should use it as underscore, right? Because we're not actually mentioning it. Let's do that in the main as well. So this, no, where did we do that? In read config. Yeah. So generally when you're using, generally when you're using something up here, it's because you want to mention this thing later. But when we're bringing in a trait like context, just so that we get these extra methods on error, I like to do as underscore to say, I'm not using this anywhere. Well, more to say, I'm using it for something that's a bit magical, which is that this method suddenly appears on this error type. Okay. So now you are going to work because I just did that use. What if I say something in here like failed to read news fragments directory? I mean, we failed to list it. Let's say that. Now, why is that a problem? Because std.io error doesn't have a context method on it. But I thought by using context, I should. Oh, it provides the context method for result. Okay, so I was right first time. I need to call this on an error value. And now if I can either do an into on this, or if I question mark it, will it let me do that? So question mark implicitly calls into here. No, I was right first time. You can't use question mark because question mark might not return. It might do something, so that would mean that we'd have to. Oh. Hang on, this is trying to convert this in the wrong direction. Oh, okay, I see what I've done wrong. All right, a lot of what I was just saying was rubbish then. But in this case, yeah, we're trying to return an anyhow error, but this method, I'd forgotten, already returned result and returned a std.io error. And we need to be able to use this strategy of error handling. Everything that fails is going to be an anyhow error, because then we can use this context thing, which lets us explain what went wrong. All right, so the key insight here was it's not an error anymore for us not to find the directory. There's probably some other errors that we should also make not be errors. Oh, come on. But for now, we'll just do that. So now when we run find with types and find calls find with types, it won't fail in the case where the thing just doesn't exist. And we won't deal with the fact that this is panicking yet, because we haven't actually found a good case to prove that our approach works. So in this case, we're just saying it's not an error. So let's run it. Oh no, we're not working yet. Yeah, this also needs to return an anyhow error. And I deleted that because I was going to import it, but I forgot to actually do that. Okay, and we've also got this problem here, which is that there's a few places where we call build, and we need to deal with the new result that comes back from build, and in the test we can just unwrap them. We could, by the way, make our test return result, but I feel like that's messy, and it actually gives you often worse error messages because it doesn't tell you what line of code created an error. If you just unwrap in a test, it'll tell you exactly which line the unwrap was on, which is useful. All right, so now we missed a question mark on build, which means that any errors that come out of build will jump straight out to here and get printed out, which is what we want to standard error. Okay, so when we're running, it now no longer fails, and it's interesting. It says removing news. No, we said removing news fragments, and towncrier just said there's no news fragments to remove. Skipping. Also, isn't our actual like changelog look? Yeah, our changelog's going to look different because we should have added no significant changes. All right, so let's do standard output first. So when we're running build, if there are no fragments to remove, when we don't need to print out deleting fragments, right? Which we print here. I don't know why it says, it should be saying removed news fragments or something. Anyway, we need a special case for if there aren't any, do something different. And the something different is that we should print this instead. So if self.fragments is empty, is that fair enough? Then do this and return. We'll return an OK value. We're just doing an early bailout. Some people don't like early bailouts, but they are nice for keeping your code fairly simple. And I think this will make the standard out part of our test pass. And now we just need to say no significant changes if there were no fragments. So that will be when we are actually writing out our changelog entry. We've looped through entries. Is there an else on the for like this? And we can just add something into contents list maybe. Now, did I just make up this syntax? Yeah, I did. Well, I think maybe in a while loop was there's somewhere where there's an else works, but yeah. All right, so look, there's even like the compiler even knows what we're trying to do and tells us you can't do it. That's interesting. All right, so we can just say, oh, hold on. We've already got an if it's empty. Great. So we can do it here. Now, we don't like negative ifs, do we? So we probably want to say if it's empty, do something, otherwise do our whole thing. And our whole thing is going to be this. It should be, there's no contents list here, it's just out.push. And I think what we need to push is a blank line and then no significant changes. And that's probably it. So a blank line, no significant changes. Full stop, was it? Yeah. All right, run. And what's different? Nothing happened. Our code did not do anything. What is entries and why is it not empty? Oh, we never get in here. Right. Okay, so we need to, I guess, count the number of actual pieces of news we wrote out, and if it's 0, I guess we could just say if frag types is empty. Can't we? Alright, so I was wrong. This should be back how it was. And then if frag types is empty, that's the case we need to care about. If what is it? Frags.types. Then we do this. And I feel like there should be a new line at the end of this file, and we're not writing one. Is that right? Hang on. Who calls this, and do they print a new line at the end of it? Write news file does the actual writing. Look what errors that could happen here. When it actually writes it, it doesn't write a new line at the end of it. I feel like we should have put a new line at the end of this. At the end of generate changelog entry. So let's just do that. I think that's fine. I hope and trust that is not super inefficient. Oh, let's do it. Let's do it in a way that we can be fairly confident is not too inefficient. Even better would be, we know the length of a string. Oh no, but all right, we're going to live with how efficient or inefficient that is. It's possible that by adding this single character, actually, which we can do with this, it's possible that by adding the single character we forced it to allocate the memory for all of this stuff and then reallocate. So a better way of doing this would be take the last thing in it out and add a new line to the end of it. Or just hang on. We added an extra new line. We added new lines here. This is how we add a new line. This is what we do. By the way, this is probably a better way of doing that same thing. Sorry for all the vacillation. Right, so now our test's going to pass. right? No, because our code is still not having an effect. So fragtypes.empty is not the right question either. Of course it isn't. What a load of rubbish. What we want is, we want to count the number of entries we wrote. So fragments, I guess it's fragments, num fragments. And yeah, it's basically every entry that we come across where we write out every entry that we come across is a fragment. And so long as there's more than 0, we wrote it. So every time we added something to contents list, let's do that. What did I call it? Num fragments, yeah. Add 1 to the number of fragments that we wrote out. And then if the number of fragments we wrote out was 0, then we need to do this alternative thing. And now we're very close to being right. We've got 1 extra new line here, and it looks like 1 too few new lines at the end. Okay, right, good. So, all right, so all of that was another sidetrack to say, if the news fragments directory doesn't exist, we should make a news file that just says no significant changes. All right, we did that. And we also did a bit more error handling. No, we did some more error handling. Fine. But the main thing we did was we said, if there's no news fragments directory, then if news fragments is missing, this is not an error. All right, so just before we actually commit this, this is not an error. This is just missing news fragments. And also, this should be called, this should just be called missing news fragments. And what should it say inside it? This checks behavior when the news fragments directory is missing. Dash make an empty changelog. All right. What was it? I described this a minute ago. This is, if news fragments is empty, write empty entry, changelog entry. All right, back to error handling. That was like a case that we thought was an error but wasn't. Let's try and find something that build could do wrong that towncrier will also consider an error and then make the error messages match, and then we'll do all the other error messages without testing every single case. So what could go wrong? We could have some other type of file system error with listing news fragments, or we could once we've found all the fragments, we could have some kind of error writing them to disk or something like that, I guess. Where is Where are the question marks in this? Are there any? Well, let's try making it not return an error. Yeah, okay. Reading from one of these files might fail. So I think we could probably recreate that by making a news fragment file that's not readable. So that seems like an error that we can deal with reasonably well. And hopefully, I wonder what towncrier will do. Let's try. Make a new test case based on minimal again. Error, unreadable, fragment. Right, so let's describe this. I really feel like I'm regretting making those things be named after the directory they're in. This checks what happens when a news fragment file exists but can't be read. So we've already got a news fragment file called 123.bugfix, but let's chmod it. User can't read it. User group and other, none of them can read it. And now we can't load it in Vim either, but it's still there. Let me double check. Start news fragments. It's still there, but when I try and read it, I'm not allowed to read it. So what happens when we run towncrier? Scripts, create test case. All right. Okay. Oh dear. Scripts can't read the file. So this isn't the way to do it. This isn't the way to do it. So let's turn it back again. I guess we'll let everyone read it. We're going to have another clever script, like we made a script before for hacking things around a bit. We're going to need another script in here, and we'll call it before. Just before, so it happens in both the case where we're running towncrier and the case where we're running our own program. Right, so it's going to be a bash script which does a chmod user group other can't read. Now this is going to be running in our work directory, so it's going to be news fragments / it was called like 123.bugfix, wasn't it? Yeah, 123.bugfix. So we wrote this code imagining that someone was going to run it, so we better actually make it get run. So that's going to happen in our create test case thing. So it's going to work a bit like this, but it's happening before towncrier is run, which is here. And it's just called before. And we're also going to run it this is in our create test case script. We're also going to run it in our run test case script again before we run our program. So create test case. Okay, and I guess we need to just, it's trying to copy things back again, and it doesn't have permission. So I guess we're going to need to run, we're going to have to do an after, which undoes our evil work as well. And again, that's going to need to be run in both places. Let's just let everyone read it again. So our test scripts are going to need to, I always think I'm just going to do a short little video where I'll just do the simple thing. And I haven't even got onto the main thing I was expecting to do in this video, which is just change a load of calls to expect into context question mark. All right, so I've arbitrarily decided that the after script runs after the after real script. And the after real script doesn't get run in this world, so where did I put it? Did I put it after I deleted the Git directory? Yeah. So here. So we run the after script in both run test case and the create test case. Try creating a test case again. Okay, that ran and completed creating a test case. So if we look at the end state, there is no news file in this case. Oh gosh. Towncrier failed with a terrible error message, but it does print permission denied blah, which I guess is gives us what we need, but we can't recreate that behavior. So it does print some stuff out into standard out. Its status was 1 again, so we're okay with our status, which is likely to be 1, 2, I should think. So if we run this test, like so, they all failed because I have a bug in my run test case, which is that test case I didn't define it in here, I only defined it in create test case. It should be, so these scripts could do with sharing a lot more code than they currently do. I've got some technical debt here for sure. And actually I want to use test case in a lot of places where I'm currently using test case. Like here, for example. Oh, come on. Where else? Or am I diffing? Yeah, I think I should also use it there. Oh, come on. All right, fine. Right, now it's going to work. All right, so most of them passed. Error unreadable fragment failed because we printed out rendering news fragments before we died, which is weird. But also, we printed out, like, we panicked, permission denied, but they print out all of that rubbish, which we're going to have to tidy up. So first of all, why did we print out rendering news fragments when they didn't? This is in build. So we say loading templates, then we call generate changelog file, and we print rendering news fragments here, but then after a while, when we're trying to read the news fragments, it went wrong. So I guess we could print out rendering news fragments after we've rendered all the news fragments, and that would make our behavior match theirs. I mean, it seems odd. Maybe they mean rendered news fragments, or maybe they just work differently. All right, so now the only difference, we're matching their behavior, and all the other tests are still passing. So by the way, that moving that log line obviously didn't break anything. So the only things that didn't match was we've got a status of 101, again, because we panicked. They've got a status of 1. And our std error is different from theirs. We want to delete like almost everything in their std error and just keep this last line, and then actually change that last line a bit as well. But I think I want to do it in a way that's a bit robust. So if something changes, so what we'll do is we'll add in a after real script. After dash real. Well, we've already written the code that makes that run. And what we'll do is we'll print out the last line of std error, and then we'll write that into a temporary thing. And then we're going to set, we'll do an in-place change of that std error.new, and then we'll move, yeah, this is what we'll do. Std error new on top of std error, like so. And what we're going to do is replace that error message, which is a bit ugly, or rather just Pythonic, I guess. We need to escape our single quotes in here. Our syntax highlighting is not working, but I think that's actually okay. Let's just try replacing it with foo. Create our test case. Oh, it should be -n1. Okay, there is something wrong with my escaping here. Maybe you can't do this? I mean, I could put it in single quotes and hope that we're okay. I hate doing that. Because there tend to be dollars and things in regular expressions. Oh, and now I have to escape these slashes. So let's use not a slash, let's use hash again. That was good, wasn't it? This is just sed syntax that we're doing now. And now I didn't say what file to change. Okay, that did it. And now it created a file that's just that last line, so that's good. Oh no, but it didn't replace it with foo, which is what I was hoping it would do. I guess because there's a few regular expression things in here. So I need to escape. Just that one maybe? Yeah, okay. So now we've managed to hit this line, which we're expecting. So basically, what we could do is just say replace standard error with what we're hoping standard error will look like. But that isn't robust to some weird assumption. Like if I change the test case later so that actually standard error looks completely different, I won't notice. This will mean that I do notice because I'm pulling out the last line and then editing that last line. Like I'm kind of asserting the last line looks like this and I want to replace it with this. It makes me feel better. So this should, I guess, say, what do we actually want to print out when this happened? What did we print out when there was a missing config file? Should look something like that, shouldn't it? No configuration file, blah. This should just be failed to read news fragments And then actually this bit can be the same. That's absolutely fine to say exactly which file causes a problem. And it's got a quote in it. So we're going to get rid of the quote there. Is that going to work? Now we have been given a standard error. Wrong one. A standard error that says failed to read news from blah. So if our program prints something like that, that feels like that's pretty good. So let's run it. It's going to fail. Because currently our program prints some panic message. And now we get to the real work that we were hoping to do this time, which is in build when we failed to... now, what are we currently printing? Failed to generate changelog entry. Here. So it's this thing that's failing. We want some kind of context here saying... and return the error like that. So it's going to say failed to generate changelog entry. And it's not happy because we're returning anyhow error, but we're not using anyhow context yet. Use anyhow context as underscore. Right, so when we run it now, yeah, it says failed to read news fragment. So I guess what we could do is apply some context inside telling us which file went wrong, which we know when we're in here. So we might need to actually update what error message we're expecting to right here. This function is too long, isn't it? It's not in generate. It is in generate, yeah. So we get out of the entry, we try and read it. Where is the question mark? Here. So here, we need this to return an anyhow error. And we'll put in a context call here. And we'll say failed to, what was it we wanted to write? Failed to read news fragment. Colon. And then what we actually want to do is substitute something in. So you can't use context for that, but you can use with context to format a string like so. I think this is the right thing to do. And we want to say entry. I think it is. Let's try it. So we don't seem to have that context. Maybe if we add one piece of context, does that kind of go to the top of the stack? So one thing we can do is just not add any context here and trust that any errors coming out already have context. But I would prefer to do better than that. Okay, we're not printing quite the same thing yet, but we can improve that. I'd prefer to be able to add context. I feel like the problem is the way we're printing it out is not printing everything it should. Instead of just turning it into a string, we can probably ask for like everything, like there's a backtrace, but that seems... I just want all the context, please. Is root cause? No. Well, description you're not supposed to use. Deref. I wonder how you get chain. What's chain? Yeah, maybe we want chain. We want to loop through the chain and print them all. Maybe. Okay. I mean, this is not bad, is it? I wouldn't mind if this was the error message, even though we've got this extra thing here. But then again, maybe even that is somehow useful. Yeah, because we just said failed to read news fragment. We didn't say what went wrong. So this is giving us a bit more. So I actually think this is not bad. I would just like to fix this problem, but let's change what we're expecting our error to be to look more like that, which we do by doing this after real thing, don't we? Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's getting awkward. Well, what we want to do is cat something into stderror.txt that looks like this. And then I guess we can just assert somehow that that this thing exists. We can just do some kind of grep. And if that grep fails, then that means that things are not as we expect. And then we can just delete that stderror new. So this is just like check the error is as we expect, and then replace with a nicer error. I think all of these should have full stops where possible. So that means we need to change what we do here. Failed to generate changelog entry is correct. Failed to read news fragment entry is correct. Now we just need the path to come with us, which we could do by asking fs for its present working directory. That would probably work, wouldn't it? If fs had such a thing. Which it doesn't at the moment, but we'll fix that. I think that's going to be the last thing that makes this all look okay. So let's imagine there's a present working directory function. Which I guess is going to return... Well, it's probably going to return a similar result to what we've got as in these other places. We'll find out. So, real file system needs to implement this. This is back to our testability, by the way. All this stuff with a fake file system is really helping us make it. Is there a PWD? Current directory. Present working directory. Come on, just exist. No. I'm sure we could make a file and then absolutize it, canonicalize the empty string. That'll probably work. And then we need to turn pathBuf into a string, which we already do here. So I guess we could just call self canonicalize the empty string. That should work. I notice we're not logging. Oh no, I'm talking rubbish. Okay, so now let's do it for a fake file system as well. And for now, I think we could just return fake pwd or something like that. And we should log the fact that we asked for the directory in case any of our tests check that later. All right. There's an error here because it's a result, so we need to... Okay, all right, this might fail itself. That's annoying, but there we go. All right, so yeah, what was happening there was we asking the file system for the current directory so that we can put it in here, and I guess we need a slash in there. And then, but because asking for the working directory itself might fail, we're just doing the dumbest thing we can think of, which is if we for some reason can't find the current directory, then we just give an empty string. So running again. And my script after real doesn't appear to be working. Oh no, I haven't run it. Okay, good. Let's run it. So now the expected standard error is this thing. Oh, which is not right because it should be. Didn't work though, but it should have the full directory listed there. I think that would be better. Although I guess maybe printing this one is fine. Actually, maybe I don't know. No, being absolutely explicit about what we're doing is good. So I guess that means our real file system canonicalize of double quote didn't work. But if we put a dot in, will it work? There we go. That worked. Yeah. So now we just need to change what we're expecting. In here. No, in here. To that. And then rerun our generator. Yeah. So it failed because we're now printing out an extra bit of information different from what towncrier does, which I think is fine. I think we're going to live with that by just in error missing config. We need our after real to just echo. Would cat be better? Echo this onto the end of, or cat this onto the end of std error. Yep. Okay, recreate our recreate our other test case, which was the other error one. Run all our test cases, and they'll pass. Okay. All right, so are you following along? So far, what we've done is we've made a new error case, a new test case, which runs towncrier in a situation where it can't read this file because of our before script, which just makes it unreadable. We've had to write an after script, which makes it readable again to copy stuff out again. We've had to adjust the error messages we're expecting because we prefer ours over what towncrier is printing. That's the change we did here to print out the whole chain of context, and meant we need to slightly change what we're expecting here as well, because it now prints out this extra line that comes from the root cause error, which is basically good, so I'm happy with it. And the real change that we made is in build, we're returning an anyhow error, and then we're calling context on any errors we get, and then question marking to return instead of panicking. So everywhere we've got an expect, we now want to replace it with something similar to that, I think. So let's go through them one by one. Well, no, it should be just dot expect. All right, so here we failed to find any fragments. No, there was an error finding fragments, I guess is the point here. Error finding fragments. Now, we're not going to test all these cases, so we might behave differently from towncrier, but I think it's become clear from that little bit of work that we did that when there's some certain types of error, towncrier will just dump a Python stack trace, which is not what we want to do. So I think it's fine not to particularly check that our error handling is exactly the same as towncrier's. I guess error finding fragments should be, I mean, we can probably do this. Not this. This. Simplify this a bit by unifying the code for these two places, by returning a result in that initial fragments thing. So fragments is now a result of news fragments, error, and then we can just check that it's real by question marking it and add some context here. Now the error message for those two halves is the same, which makes sense. Now other places where we run expect, when we're trying to delete the fragments, again I think it should be error while deleting fragments. Something like that. So is that how we put it? Failed to generate change, error finding fragments, error deleting fragments. Probably needs a full stop, and definitely needs a question mark. So if something went wrong while we were deleting the fragments, print return this type of thing that's an error. What's next? Now, when we're writing a news file, there's all kinds of things. We check whether news.exists. We'll check whether news exists, and that could go wrong. So it's some kind of error, and this doesn't actually return. So yeah, we need to return a result. Like so. And that means we need to do an OK at the end of this. Oh gosh, why is this so long? How did our function get long? Can we fix that? Let us break it into two. Whether the file exists or doesn't exist. So this is write news file, write to existing news file, and then here that should have a question mark, I guess. In fact, it should return a result which we immediately return ourselves. Oh no, there's more. So yeah, it needs to be question marked. And it's complaining because that doesn't return a result, strangely. It really should. Anyhow, error. Andy how. Sometimes when I'm typing any, I type Andy. I'm sorry. All right, and then if we're not writing to an existing news file, we're writing to a brand new file, which I guess is such a short piece of code that we'll just leave it inline. And what is the problem here? We've got a mutable reference. Passed in here. And for some reason, the lifetime specification that it added in there upset it, but now it's okay. All right. So here, if something went wrong, I think this error message is fine. Yeah, so a lot of it, we've already written decent error messages, but what we've done is just panicked, and now we've got a mechanism for returning these errors and then printing them out in a nicer way. Now, this doesn't return. This is still a horribly long function. We still need to do more work on this. But one step at a time. All right, so there's a whole load of errors in here, which we'll just fix right now. Lots of file operations that could go wrong. And we're describing them quite nicely. I could probably write a macro for this. Did that work? No, because I completely messed up typing context. Let's try again. Record a macro. You know what? I've done it stupidly. Try again. Go to the beginning of the line. Go to the next word. Replace that word with context. Go to the end and insert a question mark. End of macro. Rerun the macro. Oh, it didn't work at all. How much time have I spent trying to write a macro that I messed up several times when I could have been just doing it? I'm on my last one. It would have been a lot more fun if I just hadn't done it with a macro. All right, so let's have another search for .expect. Right, there's no .expects. There's a warning because we weren't handling the errors that came out of news file. We should, I guess, add a context here, which is error writing news file, I guess. Full stop. Have we got full stops on these other things? No, let's put them in. For consistency, even though a lot of them are file names at the end, so it feels bad to put a dot there, it might confuse people. It's important to be consistent. It'd be nice if we could check that at least one of these comes out looking alright, isn't it? A lot of these errors are the kinds of things that don't really happen in real life. I could do another thing where I hack it to make it like unwritable or something, but I don't really want to. Maybe there's something we can do. How are we looking? All our tests are passing. What about our system tests? All our system tests are passing. I'm going to get rid of this message telling us that we ran this thing because it's a bit noisy. We're still printing out that we ran them when we did the create, which I think is okay. But yeah, we'll we do it in create, but we won't do it when we run. Where is it? Yeah, there. Right, that's noisy. Okay, so I think we're there. So we've got to see at least one error message just for the satisfaction of this video, haven't we? So let us find something that we would like to fail. What if there was already a... No, that won't actually fail. What if there was an existing news.rst but it was unreadable? What if there was a news.rst.new already? That probably wouldn't fail. Well, the other thing I wanted to do was break up this function because it's still quite long. So what are the two cases? There is a start line. Yeah, all right. Those are a good two cases to break up. Let us extract a function called write news file, existing news file. Well, news file with start line. And it's done something weird with the lifetime on this file system, which it obviously thought was helpful, but made my compiler sad. There we go. And then the case where there's no start line, I guess will also break out. Write news file. No start. Or just at top. And I probably want that function to be below the other one, just so they're in the same order that they're in the function above. We can say we're done with refactoring. So that's all good. We just want to make it fail in some way. What would be a nice way? Not being able to search inside news. Not being able to write a file there. Not being able to do the move. Not being able to check existence would be particularly difficult, I think. Okay, I guess making an unreadable news.rst. That sounds like it's plausible, and then we can't do this search, so it should be say I can't do that search. So I guess we can make another test case for this. Error unreadable, changelog it would be. So let's copy error unreadable fragment and make error unreadable changelog. All right. I promise the video will end. So, unreadable changelog. This will be unreadable changelog. This checks what happens when a changelog exists, but can't be read. So inside here, we're going to have a file called news.rst. RST stands for restructured text, by the way. And before we run, we make news.rst unreadable. And after we run, we make it readable again. And then we're going to have to do something with the error message, but let's do nothing for the moment. Create the test case, as in run the real towncrier against it. That ran. And we still have a news.rst. The status was 1. Standard error is some big error message. Standard out is that. And the news fragment is still there. All right, so standard error prints a whole load of stuff and then permission denied. Blah. So that's not at all, not much different from the other error, which is fine. So we can still do this, and then what we're expecting, instead of failed to generate changelog entry, it'll be something else, and it'll be something like there'll be something in here about work / news.rst. So let's run it. We need to rerun create before this works. So yeah. So this is what we're expecting. We'll get that out in a sec. So rerun create, because create is what updates this standard error to look different. So now we're asserting it should look like this. It actually looks like this. We could give the full path of this file, but I think at this point I'm not too bothered, because this is a pretty good error. Oops. So we're saying error writing news file could not search in news.rst. The real error was a permission denied error. So create that. Run the tests. They all pass. Look at that. So what that's done is confirmed for me that in one of our new errors that we created, it prints out something quite useful to the console, which it gives us all the different context messages that we have added to our errors. The most detailed one comes from the file system library. Then where we know the file name that we're actually working with, or the operation we're doing, which is searching in this case, we add some context. Then we come out a bit further out to, like, what we were doing at the time was writing the news file. To do that, we actually search inside the news file, which is slightly confusing, but that is actually correct. So that's I think it's a pretty decent way of servicing errors to the user without it being an incredibly onerous process at the top level where you write an essay about what happened based on some huge enum that you've got or something like that. So I think it's pretty good. So what we did to make that work was we just added before and after. How did we not commit the last thing? Yeah, we didn't. Okay. So I guess this is just handling some error test cases. Oh, and it's actually handle errors better, and it's some refactoring. Oh, I've done so much at once. Sorry. So, handle errors, file system errors, basically, isn't it? And surface them. So it's surface file system errors. More in a more readable way, and tests for that, obviously. But we always write tests. All right. So what we haven't done, and I'm feeling fine about it, is we haven't written a load of unit tests for the error behavior. So every time we've done one of these question marks here, we haven't written a test checking if you do this and the file system returns this error, then we return an error. So you might feel that was to be comprehensively covering test into a test. We should test all those error cases. I feel like for a tool like this, where we're basically bailing out if something goes wrong, I feel okay not testing it at the unit level, especially because we've got a few tests that check the kind of overall behavior of what happens when something unexpected happens. Do we give the user something they can work with? All right. I hope you enjoyed. This was, like as usual, a complete bundle of distractions, but we did get into how to use anyhow to get a decent error message out to the user, which is basically use context, do the question mark, and then when you get to the top level, catch that error and loop through its chain and print out all the things you find. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll probably get back to the billion row challenge at some point, although there's loads more to do on this changelog builder. So maybe I'm having fun with changelog builder. I'm really enjoying progressing it. So maybe there'll be more on that. See you next time.